Bryce Koon, 247 Sports. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
Doing well, man. How you doing?
Could be better, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Well, I should say congratulations. Welcome, your first time being on AYS. Good to have you here. I guess let's start off with you here, Bryce. What did you think of the game?
It's baseball. I mean, it sucked. Like, look, I mean, I this is I tweeted this out and then I put it kind of over on our message board over at 24/7 Sports and Go 24/7. I just said like stuff like this happens. Like sometimes you just get punched in the mouth. And you mentioned this kind of earlier in the show, Blake, but for me, like Mississippi State had something to prove. They've dropped some midweek games. They were not a non-factor last year. They're a proud program, regardless of what elite LSU fans want to think. They're a proud baseball program. And this meant a lot to them to get this. And so they punched you in the mouth, and you're going to learn a lot about this team over the next 2 days, but nothing that's going to determine the rest of the season. You know, nothing that happens over the next 2 days is going to determine what happens the rest of the year.
No doubt. You know, I said that last night, Bryce. I think this is the biggest point in all of this. Okay. We talked about this on Thursday. I was looking at Mississippi State baseball social media. They're putting out like 2019 LSU hype videos. Okay. And I'm like, oh shit. Like somebody forgot to tell them, like, this is a playoff game for them. They were not playing around. And you saw that tonight. I think that's the biggest thing that I took away is like, oh shit, it means something to them. I don't know if it means a lot to us right now. Is it maybe? I'm not saying guys are like not excited to be there, don't want to be there. They wanted that more than you did tonight, though.
Well, and a lot of people want to talk about last year's team. For the guys that have stepped into these roles, this is kind of a wake-up call. Like, hey, no one else is walking through that door. You know, that Paul Skeens is not walking through that door. So, you know, when you get back to the hotel tonight, you get back into the locker room tomorrow, get ready for tomorrow night's game. There's not whether it's a Hayden Travinsky, whether it's these other guys that really realize, hey, we are the guys that have to kind of carry this torch. Because look, I mean, I know they dropped some games in the non-conference portion of the schedule. Guys, they could have sleptwalked through that, and a lot of the fan base did too. Just okay, let's just call me when we get to Starkville, and I feel like might get crucified for this. I feel like a lot of fans just kind of woke up and started watching LSU baseball tonight. I get it. I understand. Not everyone's a sicko, you know, like a lot of us here that likes to watch North Dakota State and LSU the full game, stuff like that. But that's kind of how I feel about it. And you wake up tomorrow, and the great thing about baseball is that you got so many more chances. Here's the problem, and then I'll stop blubbering about this. I guess people take baseball and they look at it like football. They view everything like it's 12 weeks, do or die. You mentioned I was last year. This is before I had moved to Baton Rouge. I lived 30 minutes from Auburn, went to cover the Auburn series, covered the Friday night Paul Skeens masterpiece, 15 strikeouts. The next 2 days, you would have thought that Jay Johnson should have been fired. Like from some of the reaction of the fan base. Got run ruled. And then went the next weekend and lost. I don't remember who they lost to the next weekend, but they lost back-to-back SEC series. And like you mentioned, the national champion last year got run ruled. The national champion lost to Nichols last year. Like, it's going to be okay. This stuff happens in baseball.
Yeah, I remember that Auburn series because they wore the all blues, and I'm like, oh, good Lord. It was actually Mississippi State, believe it or not. So they lost to Auburn, and then they lost to Mississippi State. I mean, like, come on, man. But you're right. I do think – Bryce, let me ask you this. I say worried. I don't know if, my public school education knows a better word, but – maybe worried's not a good word. Are you monitoring what's going on at the plate for saying, hey, man, you got to have to pick some things up here at the plate, though? Even though
it's an approach thing for me. You kind of mentioned it with Paxton Kling. Like, all the tools are there. Like, when you look at the God-given talent, a lot of these scouts talk about this, and I know you and I talked about this at spring ball the other day about some guys around the country that just kind of have that. He has all the tools. It's just about putting it together.
Right.
So for me, it's an approach thing. Like, that's what I want to watch. And look, Jay Johnson's a hitting guy. Like, if anyone is dissecting this, it's not fan number 3 in the Twitter thread. It's Jay Johnson, this staff that are looking at this. So for me, I want to see a better approach. I wrote a piece this morning about Stephen Milam, because to me, Milam is in a position that I don't think if you truthfully ask Jay, I don't think Jay and a lot of the staff thought that he'd have to be in. And it's pretty much a catalyst for this offense, a guy that kind of kickstarts this. Whether you want to say that's unfair not to a freshman, I think he's answered the call as well as an 18-year-old can. But with Kling, I know you've gotten some comments about guys like Braswell as well. It's going to take time. Like it just is. And this is this is the second part of the season. This is season number 2. You finish non-con. Now you move into this season where some guys are going to have to ramp up their level of play. Guys like Hayden, other guys have been here before. But for me, it's an approach thing. That's what I would like to see better. I think they're sometimes the plan in post-game pressers, we hear this a lot. When they've lost, hey, we didn't execute our plan. When they win, we executed it. Now, look, a lot of coaches are not
Right.
going to tell you, but that's obviously the difference. What is the difference between not executing and executing? Well, tonight I think it was like you mentioned earlier. It's a guy that was he was just feeling it. Like sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens.
I mean, Bryce, when we got to the 7th and Pearson, Bingham, and White went down, I'm like, oh shit. I'm like this. I mean, like at this point, he's through 4 innings. He's got 6 Ks. I mean, in the 7th, he threw 13 pitches and got 2 Ks. I mean, it's just like, all right, sounds good. Like, I don't know what else to say. And, like even I think the big thing too, what a lot of people were asking was about Holman. Holman gave up 2 earned runs. Now he gave up 5 runs, but 2 of them earned. The 4-6-3 double play, that's got to be accomplished. And even the bobble and left. I mean, it's just, Bryce, it seems like everything is just not hitting on all cylinders. Like, okay, they're in it. They're doing good things here and here, but then something happens and the wheels fall off.
Yeah. Yeah. Hayden mentioned last weekend, we had him in one of the post-game pressers, and he said, someone asked about, it feels like that last year you guys were hitting on all cylinders, this year not. What do you feel like the difference is? Just completely generic question, by the way. But, it's one of those questions that it was asked. And Hayden said, well, we were really hitting on all cylinders. A lot of that was kind of covered up because of the star power we had. And I don't think that's a shot at this year's team. That just shows how special last year's team was. The star power, the clutch factor.
Right.
That either these guys are going to grow into or they're not going to grow into. You mentioned kind of from the 7th inning on. Yeah, man. I mean, look, if you watch baseball long enough, you can get a feeling. And it's like,
oh man,
especially if you're sitting in a dugout. Okay. If you're sitting in a dugout and you're an offensive guy, you're just praying that bullpen door opens at some point. Because you're like, I'd rather face somebody else at this point. I don't care if the next guy throws 99. Like, I just need to see somebody else because, they just couldn't do anything. But I'm kind of with you in this. I'm not overly worried. Let's get a sample size. Let's get a sample size of SEC play and then kind of determine that, because you mentioned earlier, a lot of people were, messing around about Florida. It's still a dang good baseball team.
Yeah, I mean,
well-coached baseball team. Like it's SEC's hard.
Well, even tonight, I mean, you got an undefeated A&M going in there. Wake Forest got absolutely abused through 4 innings to Virginia. Then they exploded. I mean, like, that's why I'm not even worried on Holman. I mean, like, everybody got mashed tonight if you were on the road, which I do think is something to keep in, or just at least monitor down the stretch. Anything else maybe we did? Oh, let me ask you this question.
All right.
I would have told you at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time that LSU was going to only put up 3 and Mississippi State was going to have 15, 16 hits, or that Jay Johnson would get in the face of the home plate umpire. What would you have picked would have happened?
I would have said that you had a new copy of the college baseball game that hadn't come out yet. That's what I'd have said. That MVP 06 baseball has been, redone.
We're putting it on junior varsity.
Yeah. It was on JV level. I don't know. Yeah, man. It is a game that had a little bit of everything. And I didn't answer this when you just said it. Now I'll kind of end it with this. Luke Holman's human. Like, the guy was otherworldly through the first month of the season. Like, he's human, and this is going to happen. And Mississippi State has good baseball players. And this is, we might go out there tomorrow and see LSU beat them 10-2. Mississippi State might win 5-1. Like, you just don't know. It's way too early to be drawing some big conclusions about this team. But I do think, I don't want to downplay the concerns, because I think there are some things like, okay, this has to get going. The approach at the plate is something that I would like to see. maybe just honed in a little bit.
Couple more for you here, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. You got time for 2 more questions?
Yeah. Go ahead, man.
Okay. Switching gears here, a little bit of football. What did you think when you were out there Thursday? Anything that you walk away from last week, football wise?
I think we talked about this before Kelly walked in. How colorful the coaching is now in terms of language used, and
Oh, buddy.
because like and I mean I'm sure look, your audience is well educated on this. Anyone who knows Kevin Peoples, that didn't surprise them.
Right.
Like that did not surprise them. Um, I thought it was a welcome sight because talking with some recruits, talking with some other guys as well, like Blake Baker has made it a point of this is not we're coming in to do this in 2 years. Like this is now. It's the here and now. We've got to get this better now. It's a sense of urgency that Brian Kelly has talked about. The recruits last weekend mentioned it. You know, the guys that were in attendance. Charles Ross is one of the biggest ones, obviously, who committed, and he talked about that. He was like, Blake Baker said it's here and now. Like they've got to get this thing turned around now. So, you know, the sense of urgency I felt like was there. I still feel like there's personnel issues, especially up front in that interior, that they're going to have to address 1, maybe 2 spots when that portal opens up again on April 15th. But man, you know, it's kind of crazy. They did spring practice. We got 1 viewing period, and then we're off for a week, and then we're about to hit the ground running again here with spring ball after spring breaks over. So it was good to get out there, see some of the guys, see what they're made of, and you know, I'm excited about different guys. I think just not going too far into it. Chris Hilton, like this feels like it's got to be his off season. It has to be if he wants to, essentially not only make a mark here, but at potentially the next level. Deshaun Womack has to be on the field for a lot of reasons. And, he's got to be on the field. And I'm excited. And then the Harold Perkins dilemma, which we could do a whole another 2-hour show on just Harold Perkins. I don't know, man. And we were kind of riffing off each other before the presser started. Could have recorded that as a podcast. Harold Perkins' question's a real one for me, at least.
Yeah, I don't know, Bryce. I'm not sold right now that they won't go to some form of 3-3-5 or something exotic. I'm not sold on that. I'm not sold on that he's playing in the inside necessarily. I think that he'd be like an Isaiah Simmons, like when he was at Clemson, in the sense that, hey, man, safety, linebacker, we're just going to utilize him in different ways. I mean, that's what Venables did. But I do agree with you in reference to the colorfulness of the language. I mean, I don't think I've heard that under Kelly, and I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of glad he let that shit happen. Like in a way, like, hey man, this is a culture shock. Y'all sucked last year. Like, I mean, it ain't. Come on, it's time to go. The other thing too, I thought was funny when what you mentioned was and just the here and now, because I just really feel like that every time that we hear Kelly or something about Blake Baker or from a recruit, it's like, hey man, we're not going to suck. Okay. Like we're not going to do that. We're going to have to do something to fix it. You mentioned Chris Hilton, which I thought was interesting. Do you have any you have worries defensively, but not really offensively? At least I don't right now have worries. Is there anything personnel wise you look at offense that you're really looking forward to seeing?
Offensive line, probably the best group. I mean, if DJ Chester, which I got the chance, I mean, I know you know this, I don't know a lot of the fan base, came from Georgia. Obviously, DJ Chester did, and I did as well. So I got to watch him and cover him during the recruiting cycle.
Because Georgia was after him too, pretty heavy. Were they not?
Yeah. No, Georgia tried to get in real late, but man, he fell in love with LSU. And when you talk about DJ Chester, like that, if that assimilates well, that's a Joe Moore Award finalist group again. Like that's a top 5, top 6 offensive line in the country. I think it's a group 2 that could be the best in the SEC. So I'm excited about that. I mean, running back, we know I love Josh Williams. Josh Williams might be my favorite player to cover. Just how he carries himself, a great guy to interview. But you know what you're going to get out of him. A selfless guy who's going to make some highlight blocks, do anything to win for the team. But Caleb Jackson's the X factor for me. We can talk about the pass game all the way long. Has Caleb Jackson become more than just a freak athlete? Because that's kind of what he was in year 1. He wasn't necessarily polished in, picking up blitzes, understanding everything. And Brian Kelly talked about that last year multiple times in pressers. So for me, Blake, I'm watching Caleb Jackson because if he emerges, oh, buddy, I mean, like that's scary.
Yeah, if they got a running game with the pieces that they have out wide, it could be a little bit something. Something interesting? Do you think they go in the portal and get it back?
Yeah, it's going to have to be a specific fit. That's the problem. It's going to have to be a kid that understands he's not coming in to be RB1, but which a lot of kids are okay with that now. They don't want as much mileage on them when they get to the NFL. But I think Caden Durham could be a guy that could play sparingly. But Frank Wilson loves to have him, 4 or 5 guys deep. We're talking 365 days ago, Blake. They were 8 deep. Like, I don't know what your favorite establishment in Baton Rouge is. I don't know where you're doing trivia, but years from now, the answer of Trey Bradford getting the first touch from scrimmage in that Florida State game last year is going to be one that you need to have imprinted because that's going to be a question. Because that's how deep that room was. So I'm excited.
It almost took a wheel route to the house, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
we didn't see him the rest of the year. I don't even know if the rest of the year.
He didn't get a touch. He did not get a touch the rest of the season after Florida State. Not a touch.
His yards per attempt were fantasy just dream.
You know what? You know what's funny? Or I'll say this now: when Orgeron was here during the entire summer, the entire conversation in 18 or 19, no, it was 18, was who the running back was going to be. Like Brissett, Clyde. You don't have a running back. You're not going to be able to. Joe Burrow could come in here and light the scoreboard up, but you don't have a running back. Leonard Fournette was the one who got the opening touch. So trivia me on that, okay? Who was the first back to get a touch in 2018? I will get you. All right, Bryce Koon, 24/7. I was listening. Last thing for you here. I was listening to y'all's podcast the other night. Interesting, the hot seat tracker. I'm kind of with you guys on the Kiffin maybe to Florida. What you think about that?
Yeah. So we have a good time. We have a good time on that podcast. Obviously, I work
the
24/7.
podcast is called so they know what I'm talking.
Yeah. So it's called The Crowded Booth. A ton of fun. We talk college football. We talk a plethora of other stuff. We go live on Monday nights, 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern. And it was hot seat type of talk, but guys that are just going to be feeling the pressure and whether or not they're going to be fired or not. So I know one of my co-hosts talked about would Kiffin entertain Florida, because it's just felt like Kiffin to Alabama was like that was what he wanted. Like that's the ultimate prize. And now that door, I don't want to say it's look, anything can happen in college football. We've seen that. Anything can happen, but now that it kind of feels like that door's maybe shut. I mean, Florida's one of those places. Like there's a list, Blake. There's a list of places. If they ever get that right guy, they're right back. Right back. And Florida, I know LSU fans can't stand Florida, but Florida is one of those places. Florida is one of those places.
Tier 4 school in the SEC right now that can go from tier 4 to tier 1. Vandy ain't doing that.
No.
Kentucky's
not doing it.
Correct. Yeah. They're not doing it. And they're the only team because they got the money and resources, and God help us if they do. Because Anthony Richardson was just sitting there unused. Lane Kiffin gets Anthony Richardson. Good luck. Good luck, buddy. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, you thought Jackson Dart was crazy to watch trucking Andre Sam last year. Imagine Anthony Richardson, in that offense. But yeah, man, that's it's look, college football year round, college baseball. This fan base has been a ton of fun to cover. Our message board was melting. I literally got a quote, a DM, worst LSU offense of all time. It's like, wow, man,
not even remotely close.
That's just that. Like, I know LSU's got a rich baseball history. I'd have to go back and really look at it. There's been some bad years. Some bad years.
I can give you 2 off the top of my head. Google Smoke Laval, okay, and you will find a plethora. And then, look, I love Paul Maneri to death. Italianos, we stick together. But there were multiple ones of Jake Slaughter and Hal Hughes that sucked, okay?
Yeah,
spare me that this is the worst offensive team that we've had, okay? I remember, Bryce, Paul Maneri having arguably one of the best staffs and winning games like 3-1 and not getting a hit through like 6 innings. We got 3 runs off some BS, and then you just had to shut everybody down. The Paul Maneri way, man. Good Lord. I've never had more. Todd Peterson was hitting doubles in the SEC tournament Okay, that's what we were down
Yeah.
to. Todd Peterson hitting doubles.
We did get one of the best sound bites ever in that post-game presser ever. But yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Jock that asked the question. Like nobody else could have asked the question. It had to be Jock.
Yeah. That's
anyway.
Jock to say for you.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much. 247 Sports, the Crowded Booth. Thank you for joining us.